Hi friends, I'm Janet Laidlaw, and I originally created this channel to be a comedy channel, and what I'm finding is that my energy is going towards some basic injustices and basic human rights issues that are just too big to ignore. And when I have the ability to use video to communicate a message, I feel as if it's my responsibility to try to do so. There are many topics I'd like to explore, but there's one in particular that really haunts me, and it's the issue of chronic Lyme disease, and how in Canada chronic Lyme disease is in most cases not even acknowledged as being a real disease. There is no end of topics around Lyme disease, from the disease itself and how people are dealing with it and what treatments people are finding effective, to the politics around Lyme disease, which makes the treatment very hard to access, particularly in our Canadian medical system. But what triggered me to make this video today was basically a response to an article that was posted at healthydebate.ca, which is put together apparently by a group of medical professionals and with patient input. I don't know that much about who actually makes healthydebate.ca, but anyway, there was a while back there was an article, and it was called "The Role of Patient Advocates in Lyme Disease Policy Should Be Limited." Well, the title basically speaks for itself, and I wrote a response to that article, and in all my responses I spend time researching. I make sure that I have my facts in place, and when I went to post my response, the response didn't take, and so I had found out that they had closed that topic. So much for that healthy debate. Anyway, when I saw that they again had another healthy debate going on, and this time it's called "Is Lyme Disease Underdiagnosed or Overestimated?" And basically the point of view is that it's overestimated. And so of course I had something to say about this, and I spent quite a long time putting my post together with some links to doctors who I've quoted, and so people can kind of see for themselves what I'm talking about. I just didn't make it up from thin air. So actually I stayed up till 2 in the morning writing my response, and then this morning proofread it, finished it, posted it again. Guess what? Comments are closed. It doesn't actually say that. It says "thank you for your comment," and then later you go to look and there's no comment there. I had planned to read my response to their article on camera, but I think rather than do that, it's a little bit dry. You can read it yourself. A lot of it is responses to what they said and some of their quote-unquote facts, and I'm responding with facts that I've gleaned from other sources. But rather than read the whole thing, I'll post it below in the description, and I'll just touch on some of the highlights about this discussion. They talk about how many Canadians are diagnosed in US labs, and I think that this sort of focus on labs in other countries is actually diverting from the disease itself, because a lot of people are not just getting tested by labs and going with the results from the labs. A lot of people are getting negative tests from these labs, but they're getting a clinical diagnosis from Lyme literate doctors that are not in Canada in general. There's a few in Canada, not too many. And so focus on the lab. The lab is almost irrelevant, because that's just it's a symptom of the fact that our labs and our Canadian medical system is not dealing with this specific issue. And they talk about the experts. They use the word experts quite frequently in the article. And as far as I'm concerned, the experts are the people that treat Lyme patients. And if you don't believe in chronic Lyme, you don't treat chronic Lyme patients, in my opinion, you are not an expert. So I've got some links down below to Dr. Richard Horowitz, and he actually, I think one of the issues around Lyme is really that when people use the word Lyme, they're not necessarily meaning the same thing. So some people, when they say Lyme, they may mean one specific strain of Borrelia burgdorferi. But according to the International Lyme and Associated Disease Society, ILADS, there are 5 subspecies of Borrelia burgdorferi, over 100 strains in the USA, and 300 strains worldwide. So our testing doesn't measure all these strains of Borrelia, and it doesn't look for co-infections like Babesia or Bartonella. So what some of us are calling chronic Lyme, Dr. Richard Horowitz is calling MSIDS, which stands for Multiple Systemic Infectious Disease Syndrome. And he describes not only the different forms of Borrelia, but also co-infections that come along with these Borrelia, and each case is unique and individual. And I think, honestly, that's what our system has a problem with, is this is not a simple disease that is just one thing. And basically the problem with our testing is that we are trying to make it a very simplistic disease. This disease is far from simplistic. And again, there is a link below with Dr. Richard Horowitz describing MSIDS and his take on the situation around testing, and as well his information about the disease itself and what it actually is. The other part of the article talks about testing being the best that we've got, the testing in Canada, and my response takes quotes from other doctors who disagree that the testing is the best, and in one case Dr. Robert Bransfield calls the 2-tiered Lyme testing a complete disaster. He also mentions that if you look on the CDC website, it says that the surveillance case definition is for disease reporting and should not be used as a sole criteria for establishing a clinical diagnosis. And yet most doctors don't make a clinical diagnosis unless the testing is positive. So there are some problems there with testing and understanding how what the tests were originally made for. There are some other problems with the tests. Some of the bands that are very specific to Borrelia burgdorferi, they were so specific they were chosen for vaccine development. A positive 31 or 34 is apparently highly indicative of a Borrelia burgdorferi exposure, but those bands are not reported in commercial Lyme tests. Now that again comes from ILADS, and I'll put the link in the description below. So basically, who would spend thousands of dollars going out of country for testing? And if we had terrific tests here that actually gave us answers. And the answer to that is no one. The other thing they talk about is this rash that it's the bullseye rash that apparently Lyme sufferers are supposed to get, and doctors usually look for that as an indicator. And yes, the rash can be an indicator, but many people never get the rash. And it's they quote a certain number of percentages for how many people have the rash. Well, basically, even they admit that these studies don't reflect real world situations. It's just not an accurate study, because many chronic Lyme sufferers never notice a rash. So my niece has chronic Lyme disease. She did not have a rash. And the reason that I'm involved with Lyme disease in any capacity at all is because of what my sister and my niece went through in their struggles to get a diagnosis. And my niece was 4 years old when she got suddenly ill. So in Canada, she was labeled with childhood disintegrative disorder, which is untreatable. And when my sister learned about Lyme disease and learned that about other people whose kids had been helped by Lyme treatment, of course my sister wanted to investigate this. And the Canadian medical system did not support her in this endeavor to try to figure out what was going on. It basically gave up on this kid. And so when the treatment worked and when she regained her life again, I would have expected, because nobody could deny how dramatic the difference was after treatment. What shocks me is why was there no interest by these infectious disease doctors to know what the treatment was and to communicate with those doctors who administered the treatment to see if they might be onto something. The lack of curiosity from our infectious disease doctors absolutely shocks and appalls me, because people are effectively treating this disease and giving people back their lives. You know, the thing I hear most from infectious disease doctors is placebo effect. Oh, it's placebo effect. Well, a 5-year-old child who is in a delirium can't have a placebo effect from antibiotics. It's just not possible. And the effects were so absolutely dramatic that it's a joke to call every positive reaction from treatment a placebo effect. I mean, that's another form of denial. So I would just implore infectious disease doctors to get curious and maybe check out some of the links that I'm posting below, because these are doctors who are treating chronic Lyme. In my book, these are the experts that are treating chronic Lyme. And of course, in the article, there's the argument about long-term antibiotics, because, you know, there are harmful elements to using long-term antibiotics, which is absolutely, nobody wants to use antibiotics if they don't have to. But let's face it, you know, we use long-term antibiotics for HIV patients. We use antibiotics for tuberculosis, for hepatitis. If there's a need and it's between life and death, or quality of life and death, you'll do what you need to do. No one likes chemotherapy either, and that's a whole other topic, but people do what they need to do to survive. Now, the article also talks about BC's complex chronic disease program and how Canada should have more programs like that. And I really have to say that that is the last thing that Canada needs, is more programs like that. The program in BC started off with a lot of Lyme sufferers feeling really hopeful that perhaps there would be research helping their specific condition, but this clinic doesn't even acknowledge Lyme as a chronic infection. It calls Lyme Lyme-like syndrome. And basically they offer things like Tai Chi and meditation, painkillers, psychiatric drugs, but they don't treat infection. I feel that this is the most insulting waste of taxpayer money that you could spend on a pretend disease, you know, Lyme-like syndrome. call it what you want, but what the clinic is doing, I mean, I'm all for Tai Chi and meditation and using pain medication or any medication for the appropriate situations, but you don't treat an infection with meditation. It's just not going to make you better. I speak regularly to a lot of people who have chronic Lyme disease, and I have to say that it is really has to be one of the most disheartening and invalidating diseases you could ever have. A lot of patients are blamed for the disease and really calling it a somatoform disorder, in my mind, is another way of just saying, hey, basically you're making this up, or it's all in your head. And can you imagine if you had cancer and you were told that there is no cancer in this area, or you know, your symptoms, you're fine, your symptoms are all in your head. You know, a lot of people actually say pretty cruel and nasty things to Lyme sufferers, and I've seen it myself on social media when I've made comments, and basically I've even seen doctors say completely rude and just basically completely unprofessional comments towards people who have Lyme, calling it Lyme hysteria, you know, stop spreading your Lyme hysteria, and you know, basically all your basic elementary school bully type comments. So I'm pretty aware of what does go on with Lyme sufferers and how they're treated. And I have to say that I truly believe that one day we will look back on this as a shameful time in history. And for now, the one thing everyone can do for the people that are suffering from this disease that they did not invite and did not want is to spread awareness and to share some of the links that I'm posting below with others, because this isn't just me with no medical background spouting off hysteria. This is a real disease that doctors have studied. There are studies showing persistent Lyme. There are over 700 studies that show persistent Lyme exists. These doctors in the links below, they're some of the ones that I think really are the true leaders in helping patients to conquer this disease. So please share, and please have compassion to people that you don't understand. If you happen to be a medical professional and you were not aware of the intricacies of this disease or the other perspectives from patients for this disease, please don't shut down the conversations that was done in this article. Please open the conversations, because the only way we're going to really deal with helping patients overcome their symptoms is by keeping an open line of communication. And if patients feel they can't speak to their doctors, where do they go? You know, it's a very hopeless feeling to know that you're not supported by your medical system. So please share. And for those of you that have Lyme, just keep on keeping on. You deserve the health care that every citizen in our country deserves to have, and you deserve the respect and the acknowledgement for what you're going through, and don't accept any less from that to those around you. Be fair, be honest, and just keep on, because what choice do we have? The alternative isn't so great. So just keep on keeping on and stay strong, people.